interrupt the program as we go along if people do have questions, so please don't be afraid to jump in. And then at the end of the webinar, if anyone has any questions or wants to talk about anything in more detail, I have my contact information, and I'm happy to find time to help anyone or offer suggestions if I can be of service. So just wanted to start today with a brief overview of what we're going to talk about and the plan. So when I came up with this webinar, my goal was to hopefully give other people in the development world some ideas that they could hopefully implement that would help you and your clubs raise more money and in turn serve more kids or create greater impact. So 3 kind of things that we're going to cover here today is, or steps, are doing an analysis of your current revenue and what that looks like, building a plan for the existing donors that support your club, and then some systems and calendar options that will allow you to do things to scale and to focus on the things that are really important to driving annual giving and raising more money. So just jump right into it. Let me give you a little bit of background. I started with our club about 4.5 years ago, and one of the first things that I did in conjunction with my CEO was to do an analysis of our revenue to understand exactly where our funds were coming from, who was giving those funds, what they were supporting, when they were supporting throughout the year, corporations, foundations, individuals, et cetera. I mean, everyone knows kind of the typical breakdown, how much was government support, how much came through BGCA, and really understanding what that looks like. And the reason why that's important is that, you know, I believe that as a club or at any organization, whether nonprofit or for-profit, you want to look to diversify your revenue streams as much as possible. You don't want to be too dependent on any one donor or any one contract, just in case things change and people go in a different direction. You don't want to put yourselves or your club in any potential jeopardy for funding and financial sustainability. So that was one of the first pieces that I looked at for our club, and you know, it gave a pretty clear snapshot of what it looked like. So this was based off our audit for the year right before I started. So I started in September. This audit finished the end of June, a couple months before. So when we looked at the revenue sources for, you know, say, call a $1.4 million budget, that big purple group on the left there, contract services, that was a partnership that we had with our local school district to deliver a program. You know, that scared me that it was almost 50% of our annual budget. The other things there, you see United Way funding was less than 1%. The blue fund, the blue triangle at the top there, those are individual contributions, and that was about 10%. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why that's not showing up on the pie chart. The endowment there in green, 9%. We have a separate foundation. It's a separate nonprofit that is there to just support our club. So that's a huge resource to have 10% coming from there. We had 17% of our budget coming from events, and that purple group is what I consider major gifts, and that was about just around 10% as well. It was about $150,000, $160,000 a year. So when we looked at this pie chart, it really helped to identify, again, where all our revenue sources were coming from. But most importantly, what I used this for was looking at what we needed to do to grow and to identify areas of potential growth that we could do a lot more and raise a lot more money. And for myself, and being where we are in Southern California and in Orange County, we're blessed with the the opportunity to find individuals that have the capacity to do more. So my thought was to really focus on that purple bucket there, kind of the major gifts component, and really growing that number. So what we really had to do was to do a more in-depth, deeper dive on our donors and who was giving and what that looked like. And again, to really focus on who was giving, when they were giving, and what they wanted to support, what that looked like. So I don't know how many folks on the call use Donor Perfect or not, but this is a snapshot of our last fiscal year from a report that's a canned report right out of Donor Perfect. So if those of you on the call are using Donor Perfect, I would suggest you look at this report. It's a very easy way to look at some real key metrics. And this is just a snapshot of the data. I couldn't get all the data to look correct on a PowerPoint. So we can kind of look at this in more depth if people want to later, or please feel free to call me to discuss this. But these kind of reports allow you to really look at some key metrics in your donor database, and the number of donors that you currently have, the number of new donors over the last year, your retention rate, the number of reactivated donors that you had. So one of the things back in 2012 that I noticed is that our retention rate was low. I think it was in the 30–40% range, which compared to I think a lot of nonprofits, that's the typical rate. But my belief is that existing business is a lot easier to retain. Existing donors are a lot easier to retain than going out and trying to find brand new donors year over year. If you're losing 60–70% of your existing donors year over year, that's a lot of people that you need to replace to get this done. So one of the focus that I had right away was looking at that retention rate and looking at what we needed to do to identify what we could do to make that retention rate a lot higher. And as you can see from the highlighted section at the bottom there, last year we had a 51% retention rate, which we're really proud of. Our goal is to stay over 50% every year and to push that, but that was an exciting metric for us to finally hit 50% retention. It just lets us know that we're doing a really good job of stewarding the people that are making gifts and that they continue to support our club year over year. The other thing that I learned when I did this revenue analysis was that there were maybe 20 at tops 30 relationships that were responsible for bringing in, let's say, 80% of the revenue outside of that school district contract. So immediately what that told me is that I wanted to focus on those existing relationships to make sure that those donors, those corporations, whatever they were, and it probably varies a lot club by club, but that those donors and partners really felt a true connection to what we were doing here at the Boys and Girls Club. They understood where their money was going, how it was being spent, that they had a really true picture of the impact that was being created. So, I think it's really important that after you go through this revenue analysis, you really build a plan for those existing donors. I think it cannot be said enough that you have to sit down and talk to people multiple times throughout the year, multiple times over many years to really build that personal relationship. For me, I think it was really the key to unlocking the potential to do more with existing donors and get new folks in the door. But for me, it really, if you boil it all down, it comes to understanding why folks want to support the Boys and Girls Club, what they are personally passionate about, and also understanding when and how they want to support the club. So I want to make sure that, you know, certain donors love to go to galas or special events. Other donors have zero interest and it actually turns them off. I want to make sure that I understand how donors feel about all the ways that they can support the club, and that I'm only asking them in the ways that they want to be asked and supported in the ways they want to be supported. So, you know, I think that is really paramount as you go to start this process, is that, you know, when you build these relationships with folks, it really is making it a personal connection between you or as either the development officer or a CEO or CPO, whatever the title or your role is, but really making it a personal connection and a personal relationship with these kind of major strategic donors. And what we try to do at our club is obviously, you know, the first couple of years that I was here, we focused a lot of time and energy on those existing relationships and new relationships that we're able to connect with for folks that what we call, you know, strategic gifts. And for us, that's around $10,000 and above. But we also wanted to make sure that for smaller donors, that they also felt a personal connection to the club and what we were doing. And you know, as we built these systems and started to grow revenue, we've also created systems that have allowed us to steward and build relationships with not just the very large and strategic donors, but also to smaller donors. One other point here I just want to emphasize, I really believe that, you know, again, the development staff needs to be kind of the face or connection to these major and strategic donors. There are certain folks that have maybe a relationship with program, and that's fantastic, and you want to foster that. But I really believe that for clubs, it's important that somebody manages all of these relationships and has responsibility over when people are being reached out to, how they're being stewarded, when they're being updated throughout the year, and then when it's time to talk to them about making a gift, they know who the person is that's going to ask them, and it shouldn't be a surprise. You know, I really think that these major donors, you need to have a custom plan for all of them, kind of going back to what I said before. You don't want to ask people to support your golf tournament if they're not interested in playing golf. You know, save your asks and commitments to when they are interested and when they want to support the club. So one of the things that we did, not just for our major donors, but smaller donors, and this kind of, we'll talk about this, you know, in our systems and plans a little bit later in the presentation as well, is kind of coming up with giving platforms for donors. There's a lot of best practices show that people will be motivated to hit different levels based on either recognition or things that they will get, quote unquote, get from nonprofits. So this is something that we have, and again, this doesn't look very clear on the PowerPoint. We have it as an attachment that you can all look at the end of the presentation or take with you. But this is something that we use to help guide folks and provide value. And one of the things that I talk about here on the slide is we work to provide mission moments, not tchotchkes. So we're not giving out mugs and hats and wristbands and things like that. We give volunteer opportunities and options to participate in some of our really smaller volunteer events. So our Thanksgiving event, our Christmas event, they're smaller, intimate volunteer events. Those are also opportunities where, you know, unfortunately, I think for our club, I'm sure a lot of you have the same problem, is that you get swamped with volunteers around Thanksgiving and Christmas, and, you know, we just can't support all the volunteers that want to be engaged. So we limit our Christmas event and our Thanksgiving events to a certain number of donors, and our larger donors get first priority to volunteer. So those kind of things where it's mission moments, you always want to, again, build that personal connection, get people to the club in front of the kids as often as possible. I think that's really, really key. And again, this handout will be available for folks at the end of the presentation. Going along with building a plan for existing donors, one of the things that I helped kind of shift and our CEO and our program team really focused on is really developing strategic partnerships with major donors. And what I mean by that is, again, once you build that personal connection and donors understand your vision, where you're going, what you're doing, the scope of your programs, the real return on investment that they're getting for their gifts, they will invest in the vision and the path forward a lot more than they will, say, investing in a small program or payroll. One of the things that, we try to do is limit the amount of, small asks that we're making for our robotics program or, our Toastmasters program or whatever it is. Those programs are, relatively small in the overall budget. And if you talk to major donors about small opportunities, you're going to get small gifts. Whereas if you talk to them about, let's build a strategic partnership, how do you want to get involved? What are the things that you're passionate about investing in? This is where we're trying to go, and this is how your gift would help us get there. It changes the tone about that conversation, and it really helps those larger, major donors think about ways where a larger, more strategic investment actually will bend the needle in their community more than smaller gifts will. So I think working to change that framework with your partners is really, really important, and one that we should all be working towards. So once you kind of have your existing donors mapped out, you have a plan to customize that relationship, and you're really focused on, building that true partnership with those folks. And, I would say for our club, that took at least a year, if not longer. It would probably be, at the end of 2 years, we felt really comfortable with, the donors that we did have, that they felt connected. We were able to grow the donor base over those first couple of years. So, a couple new major donors came into the fold. But after, 2 years of being here at the club, one of the things that we realized is that the actual number of donors that we had drastically shrunk. So when I started, we had a little under 300 donors that were supporting our club annually. That number had dropped down to under 200. So we had lost over a third of the donors that did support our club. For us, it didn't necessarily hurt us because those were smaller donors. But what we realized is that we were losing the capacity to serve more of those smaller donors, and that we needed to build the systems and really have a calendar and plan and outreach developed for smaller donors as well. We, again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, we wanted to work to eliminate concentration risk in our revenue. So we had grown our major donors component, but now we had set ourselves up for a potential issue where if you lost one or two of those major donors, it could be an issue, and that we weren't diversified across a broader scope of smaller donors. So what we wanted to do, again, is to create the systems, hire the people, and put those in place that would allow us to, again, start attracting more donors, smaller donors, and stewarding those folks so they felt that their smaller gifts felt valued. One of the things that we did to start this was to build a volunteer engagement platform that was easy. And when I say easy, it was more easy in the sense of for our program team. One of the things that we were doing was that if we had a corporate volunteer that wanted to come in and get engaged with our clubs, that we would have, a carnival or a special event that day, and those corporate volunteers would, be a part of that. The problem with that is that you had to recreate that model every time you had somebody that wanted to volunteer, and it was a really big production. It was disruptive to program, and it was not scalable to produce in a large way. So we only did a couple of those a year. Our club came up with what we call our mentor days, and we basically, what we did is, long story short, is we created a platform where corporate partners can come in, they volunteer with our kids for an afternoon, usually a Friday, for 2 or 3 hours a day, and they integrate into the existing program that's already there. So I won't go into all the details, but what this allowed us to do was to get a lot more volunteers in the building. And the way that I look at volunteers is that, number one, they're there to assist us on the program side and provide options and opportunities for kids to meet people that they otherwise might not meet. But on the flip side of that, and me being the fundraiser, I don't mean to sound too much about fundraising, but I look at volunteers as being future potential donors. And, having a corporate partner that's willing to come into your building, 1 or 4 times a year, the odds are that they will give financially significantly increases with the more people that participate with volunteer opportunities. So, I think the clubs really need to look at how they're getting volunteers in the door, especially if you are able to bring in corporate partners. Corporate partners right now are really looking for more opportunities to have their volunteers engage and get involved in the community so they have a sense of better connection to their corporation and their communities. And then also we've been able through this to convert a lot of these individual volunteers into individual donors. So it's kind of a pipeline to getting more people in the door to help and assist with program, but also to potentially become future donors. Any questions at this point in the conversation, or should I just keep rolling?
You can keep going.
Okay, great. This next slide here, looking at outsource partnerships, I feel like this is really important and one that I'm starting to hear more nonprofits and more clubs discuss, but this is something that our club has had pretty good success with. One of the things when we went through the revenue analysis and we looked at, okay, if we're going to grow major gifts and fundraising, how are we going to do that? It's bandwidth, right? There's only so many people that we have on our teams. Usually, when I started, it was just me. I'm sure a lot of the people on this call are in the same boat. But what I decided with Robert, our CEO, and our board is that if we were going to target major gifts and focusing on that, it was going to be very hard or impossible if we were going to try to also look at marketing and events and grant writing and our upcoming capital campaign. And there's a ton of different things that we all do for the clubs. We all wear many different hats. But if you're going to be expected to cover 125% of the jobs that need to be done, it's going to be pretty hard to get them all done in a way that's effective and that bring results. So these are some of the areas that I think clubs could look at, potentially looking at outsourced partners. The partners that we have are a cost-effective way to get additional skill sets or expertise that we could not hire full-time or part-time people to do. It just would be too expensive to bring on a full-time marketing expert that handles design and strategy. And our staff is still very involved in that process, but we have an outsourced partner that helps us in that capacity. So I think this is an interesting way or a thing for clubs to do that could help unlock time and resources in the internal RD teams where you can focus on the things that you really need to focus on. And for us, it was major gifts. Maybe other clubs, it's events, and that's where, your community is really excited about event management or things like that. But for us, it was major gifts. And this is a way that clubs can look to kind of have a force multiplier that's cost effective and something that could be of big value. And I know some clubs might have questions about how to talk about their boards about this and what this looks like. Again, I'm happy to discuss in more detail if anyone likes to. But, I think there's a statement that can be made that, if you spend X dollars, it could mean 3X in different areas. Those are hopefully trades that boards are willing to make, and those are investments that they're also willing to make. But I know that our board asked a lot of questions when we started this idea, and we have, it's an ongoing concern as we look to expand or add new partners to it.
Hey, Travis.
Again, yes.
I have two questions that relate to what you just talked about. One is Rhonda wanted you to give an example of what you did with that.
In terms of how we use an outsourced partner?
I'm assuming.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, so
Yes.
I'll go to I'll talk about special events. So I don't know how many clubs on the line handle special events, but for those of us that do them, they take a lot of time and energy. I know for me, it was frustrating picking out which tablecloths we're going to use and what napkin fold we're going to have and what we're going to serve at dinner. We have an outsourced partner that helps us manage our special events. They take care of probably 80 or 90% of the logistical things that it takes to put on a special event, the lighting, the audio, things like that. And it allows myself and my team to focus on fundraising for special events. So we're not spending our time choosing napkins. We're spending our time going out in the community and finding partners that want to support special events.
Okay, and the next one was Chris wanted to know, what do you consider a major gift and how is there a ratio you use to base, hold on. He wanted to know, is there a ratio you use based on a club size?
Yeah, no, we don't have a specific ratio that we use. When I started 4 years ago, we put that number, in the $5,000 to $10,000 and up range, and I know that can vary for different clubs. It probably would depend on, when you look at the number of donors that are supporting you, kind of use the 80-20 rule. 20% of folks are probably generating 80% of the revenue. That's kind of what I use to ballpark it, and that's what I used, and it seems to play out in a lot of different ways. As we've grown, that scale has kind of slid a little bit. I'm focused on folks that are around, $25,000 and up, but I think it all depends on your size, what the socioeconomic conditions are in your local areas. I think there are a lot of things that go into that.
Okay, and as a follow-up to the last question, Rhonda wanted to know, do they charge for this service?
Absolutely. I mean, these outsourced partners they're paid for-profit contractors that we work with. So one of the things that we found is you often get what you pay for. And when you have people that want to volunteer to help in certain ways, like meeting deadlines can be tough. How do you hold them accountable? Whereas if you build it in your budget to have this, it's a lot easier to hold people accountable and make sure you're all on the same track. But we found it's a very cost-effective way to expand our bandwidth as an organization without adding, staff to our payroll.
Okay, that was all of the questions for now.
Okay, perfect. I'll keep going. One of the other things that we look to develop are marketing and stewardship plans. This kind of ties back to that idea of building a personal relationship with folks. You want to, as everyone knows, you want to be messaging and outreaching to people multiple times throughout the year. So you don't want it to be that, oh, hey, Joe Schmo, it's February 16th. You know, you made a gift last year. Do you think you could write another check this year? I think that's the worst thing that clubs can do with donors. I think you really need to build a plan to outreach to them, and that goes across many different platforms. We now have a quarterly newsletter. We send out bi-weekly e-blasts. We have social media posts. We have our annual report. For those major donors, like I'm constantly sending emails or phone calls. I will also attach a personal note to our newsletters and send it to those folks, so it's an additional personal touch that people get. And then one thing I can't say enough, the handwritten thank you note when people actually do give or when they meet with you. It's amazing how effective it is and how few people do it, and it makes a big, big difference. I don't know how many people have made that comment to me about, you know, you just thank us more, you seem more appreciative. I mean, it's not rocket science, but you want to make people feel appreciated for their gifts. I look at, you know, being an RD and taking in donations. These are either corporations or individuals or families' money that they have earned, and there are a lot of different places and charities that they could support. And if they choose to support us, I want to make sure that they feel very appreciated for the support they're giving. So really coming up with an annual calendar of when your newsletters are going to go out, when your e-blasts are going out, how many social media posts you're going to post a year, when your annual report's going to go out, and then really holding yourself or your team, or if you have a partner that you work with, accountable to hitting those deadlines. It's really, really important that our donors and our community see our clubs out there a lot, and that they're not just seeing us when it's time to ask for money. I think that's incredibly important. And again, there are attachments about you know, a recent newsletter that we created, a recent stewardship plan that we created, and I'm happy to share that. And again, I'm happy to go into more detail if people want to reach out in more depth after this. And you know, these are a lot of steps, and there's a lot of things that went into this process. And this was, you know, this is my 5th year now, but the reason why I think doing these kind of things are important and why you know, I'm passionate about sharing them are the results that our club has seen. And you can see the difference between 2012 and 2016. The major gifts component in the middle. We grew from about $160,000 in 2012 to $1.2 million this past year, and that is a game changer. For us, it's allowed us to serve a lot more kids. It's allowed for us to invest in programs that are cutting edge and building out our teen program and college bound and robotics and coding and things like that. And then we also did a capital campaign, which is not included in these numbers, of about $2.5 million in the first 2 years that we were here. So, you know, this, for me, I think this process works and it builds results. And, you know, we're really excited about what it's done for our club and what we're continuing to build and grow. And, you know, where our RD team is now versus where it was 4 years ago is different. We have, you know, 2 dedicated staff that are on my team beneath me. We have a third staff that splits time So we've seen growth in our RD team, and it's exciting to see what this is doing in terms of revenue. And to myself and the rest of the RT team, it's more exciting to see what it's doing in terms of impact and outcomes on the program side. So again, thank you everybody for the time this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. My contact info is up on the screen. I am more than happy to be a resource to anyone that wants any additional information. Shoot me an email or give me a call. Email is probably best, but we can set up a time for a call. But at this point, if there are any other additional questions, please feel free to jump in.
Okay. We have one question. How many development staff do you have at your club?
So right now, there's myself, and then we have two dedicated folks beneath me, and then we have another member of the team where probably a third of her time is helping with RD-related functions, mostly special events. But when we started, it was just me.
Okay, are there any more questions? Okay, we have one more. Do you have special giving units, for example, alumni, Club Blue?
I don't know what Club Blue is. I'm interested to see what that is. This year, alumni is something we have not really focused on in the past, but that's something that we're building out this year. So, yeah, I think now that we've reached the point where we can do more things, we're looking to build out our alumni network, get people involved. Our plan to build out alumni is for the first at least year is going to be nothing but outreach and awareness to hopefully attract alumni, get them reconnected, understand what's going on, and no fundraising involved, and then to build that plan into the strategy probably year 2 or year 3 down the road. We don't want to come out of the gates and start hitting people up for money right away. We want to make sure that they, again, feel that personal connection before we start fundraising.
Okay, what are the terms of your donor society, level of giving, and continuity of giving?
Can you repeat that again, Heather?
What are the terms of your donor society, level of giving, and continuity of giving?
Yeah, so on that attachment, it kind of has some of that information, but we look at it in terms of annual giving, and then the levels, off the top of my head, I think it starts at $100, and then it goes up to $100,000 plus. So again, I think that when you set that up, it might depend club to club, but for us, we felt that we could have donors in all those levels, which was important, and we've used that. And when I first looked at that, I was kind of shocked to think that people would be motivated to give $1,000 more to get into XYZ level, but it works, and people are motivated by that.
Okay. What donor tracking systems have you used?
We use Donor Perfect, and I will say I forgot to say this at the beginning of the discussion, but kind of when you go through your revenue analysis, and one of the other things we did was make sure to try to clean up our data as much as possible. Garbage data in is garbage data out. So if you don't have systems or controls about how data is being entered or who's entering it or when it's being entered, it's a big problem, and you really want to clean that up as fast as possible. So implementing systems in terms of when gifts come in, how it's being entered, accuracy of the data, really understanding how important that is, and for the people that are managing that process, that they understand how important it is. I know our club, probably for the 3 or 4 years before I started, had really started focusing on that and had improved the database, but the data before that was pretty weak. I mean, there were errors, there were multiple entries for the same donor, so you really have to spend time and energy and money into cleaning up your data. But back to kind of the tracking aspects of it, we use Donor Perfect. It's pretty solid. It's not great. We've looked into doing Salesforce and have not done it for a couple different reasons. But we're with Donor Perfect right now and sticking with that for the near future.
Okay. And Chris wants to know what are your thoughts on monthly giving, and also what are you doing in terms of online giving and peer-to-peer, what you're doing in terms of online giving, peer-to-peer, and crowdfunding.
Yeah, so we have the capability to do all of those platforms. We've tried rolling them out, haven't had a ton of success doing them, to be totally honest. Peer-to-peer, we tried to do, board campaign, and we had 1 or 2 board members, and, I did it as a staff member. We raised some money, but it didn't really gain the traction that I was hoping it would. We're kind of keeping that in the back of mind with a couple initiatives that we have, kind of like that alumni idea might be a better way to do it. Monthly giving, we always present it as an option for folks, but we've had very little traction for people that do it, and that's all through our website. Online giving, it's been hit or miss the last couple of years, but again, we're trying to build a couple different things. So we're driving that more as an option. I know that a lot of folks want to pay with credit card and they want to pay right now. So we're building that functionality and improving that functionality right now. Like all our special events now, people can go on the website, they can sign up, they can pay for them all via the website electronically, and there's no more checks or anything like that. So we're working on those systems, but they have not been a game changer for us.
Okay, I think that's all of them. Oh, sorry, there's one more. Do you use a wealth screening system?
So we do use wealth screening. It's a great point. Whoever asked that question, we use the partnership with Boys and Girls Club of America. For anyone who's not using it, I seriously suggest that you talk to your Boys and Girls Club of America rep and get access to that if possible. I hope I didn't just overstep there, but yeah, we use Wealth Engine. It's a great way to screen your database and help identify folks that maybe are giving $100 a year that might have a lot more capacity to do more. So I would definitely recommend that clubs look into using Wealth Engine. I think it's Wealth 8 or something like that that Boys and Girls Club of America has access to. But it's a great resource and something that helps you find greater potential in the folks that are already supporting your club. But one caveat to that, everyone, I always say with wealth screening, we are very sensitive to the fact that we do wealth screen. I think donors in the philanthropic community are kind of aware that that information's out there. I would just stress that you want to be very sensitive about who you tell that you wealth screen and what kind of information you get back, because you could very easily turn somebody off that you have information like that about them. So it's very useful information, but just be very careful with the information once you have it.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, Travis, we can go ahead and wrap it up.